If you ever get a seat over the wing, you're basically spending the whole flight next to a ticking time bomb. Just inches away from that cabin window are tens of thousands of liters of highly flammable jet fuel pumped straight into the wings, the thinnest, most violently vibrating part of the entire journey. Instead of hiding it inside the fuselage for protection, engineers choose the one place that looks the most dangerous to store the most explosive thing on board. Sounds like a disaster waiting to happen, right? Why not put it in the spacious, reinforced body of the plane instead? Well, it turns out intuition is playing tricks here. In aviation, turning those wings into a massive gas tank isn't reckless, it's a masterstroke of survival. It's a high-stakes physics puzzle where, if they did it any other way, the aircraft might never even leave the ground. So, why exactly is that? Let's find out, with simple but surprising. The first reason is structural, and it's one most people never think about. When a plane is in the air, the wings are being pulled upward by lift the entire time. But the heaviest parts of the airplane, the body, the passengers, the cargo, are pulling downward closer to the center. So the wing is being stressed in two directions at once. A good way to picture it is like a long diving board. If the board is being forced upward while most of the weight sits closer to where it's attached, something is going to take the strain. And on an airplane, that high-stress zone is the wing root, the part where the wing meets the fuselage. That area matters a lot, because it is one of the hardest working structural points on the whole aircraft. Now, here's the part most people never realize. An empty wing actually has a tougher job. If there were no fuel in the wing would still have to produce the same lift, but with less weight distributed through it to help resist some of that upward force. That means more bending, especially near the root, and that bending is exactly what engineers want to reduce. Once fuel is stored inside the wings, the picture changes. That fuel adds weight along the span of the wing, which helps balance out part of the lifting load. So instead of all that force concentrating as sharply at the root, the load is better distributed across the wing. The fuel is not just weight the wing has to carry, it is also helping the wing handle the load more efficiently. But that is only part of the reason fuel goes there. But structural efficiency is only part of the story, because fuel creates another problem. It is one of the heaviest things on the aircraft, and it keeps disappearing. On a long flight, a jet can burn through tens of tons of fuel, so the airplane is not just carrying a heavy load, it is carrying a heavy load that keeps shrinking the entire time. And when that much mass changes during flight, balance matters. Aircraft are designed to operate within a very specific center of gravity range. If that balance point moves too far forward, the plane becomes harder to trim and control efficiently. Too far aft, and it becomes less stable and more sensitive. That is not something engineers want shifting throughout the flight. Put most of the fuel far forward in the fuselage, and as it burns off, the airplane gradually becomes more tail-heavy. Put it too far aft, and the reverse happens. Either way, the aircraft would have to keep compensating for a balance shift that gets worse as the flight goes on. Luckily, the wings happen to sit very close to the part of the airplane where designers want that mass to live. They are near the aircraft's usable center of gravity range and close to where lift is being generated. So as fuel burns out of the wings, the airplane's balance changes much less dramatically than it would if that same fuel were stored far forward or far back. That is a huge advantage, because the goal is not to stop the airplane from changing at all. That is impossible. The goal is to make sure it changes in a way that stays smooth, stable, and predictable. And that is exactly what wing fuel helps do. There is also a very practical reason this design works so well. Space inside the fuselage makes money. That is where the passengers sit, where the bags go, where the cargo goes, and where a lot of critical systems have to live. Every inch inside the body of the airplane has value. Fuel does not earn revenue by itself. So if you start filling that space with fuel, you are giving up room that could have been used for paying passengers or cargo. And airlines do not want to make that trade unless they absolutely have to. The wings solve that problem beautifully. On many aircraft, the wing is not just holding a fuel tank. The wing itself becomes the tank. That is called a wet wing design. Instead of placing one big separate container inside the wing, engineers seal parts of the wing's internal structure so fuel can be stored directly inside the wing itself. That makes the design extremely efficient because the space is already there. You are not adding a giant extra tank. You are turning existing space into usable fuel volume. And no, it is not just fuel sloshing around inside a hollow wing. The system is divided, vented, sealed, and carefully managed so the fuel stays safe and moves in a controlled way throughout the flight. So space is not the deepest reason fuel goes into the wings, but it is one of the smartest side benefits. You get a huge amount of fuel capacity without giving up the part of the airplane that actually earns money. But even once the fuel is on board, the job is not over. Because the airplane does not just store fuel, it actively manages it. Most passengers never notice this, but during flight, the fuel system is constantly making sure that fuel is being used in the right order and kept in the right places. On many jets, most of the fuel is stored in the wings, but some aircraft also have a center tank for additional range. And here is where the logic gets interesting. If there is fuel in the center tank, that fuel is often used first. Why? Because the airplane usually wants to get back to the condition where most of the remaining fuel is in the wings, where it helps reduce wing stress and keeps the mass in a more favorable location. So even the order in which fuel is burned is part of the aircraft's design logic. And there is another thing the system has to watch the whole time: lateral balance. Fuel cannot just be allowed to sit unevenly from one wing to the other. If one side carries significantly more fuel than the other, the airplane starts carrying uneven weight too. So pumps, valves, sensors, and transfer systems are constantly doing quiet housekeeping in the background. They decide which tanks feed the engines, they help keep the left and right sides balanced, and they make sure the aircraft stays in a stable, efficient configuration as the fuel load drops. So when you are sitting there watching a movie at 35,000 feet, the airplane is not just burning fuel. It is managing a large, shifting mass inside a flying structure with a very specific idea of where that mass should be. And that is really the bigger point. Fuel in the wings is not there because engineers ran out of room anywhere else. It is there because that is where the airplane works best. It helps the wing structurally. It keeps the aircraft better balanced as fuel burns off. It uses space that does not compete with passengers or cargo, and it fits into a fuel system designed to manage weight intelligently throughout the flight. So next time you are on a plane and you look out at the wing, you will know that fuel is not sitting there by accident. It is there because one of the strangest looking choices on the airplane turns out to be one of the smartest. So now I want to hear from you. What is one thing about airplanes you used to assume was true, but now you are not so sure about? Drop it in the comments. And if you like videos that break down how everyday technology really works, subscribe and stick around. There is a lot more coming.